very passionate about applying science and technology to help people in their daily lives. I have a lot of information in my brain, and I take in lots of information. I try to be discerning, but overall sometimes I feel quite overwhelmed. I feel like there's just not enough time to learn everything I want, and there's not enough time to do this and not enough time to do that. So, as the universe would have it, as I was reading Naturopathic Doctor News and Review, checking out some biofield research, which is fascinating, I came across this wonderful article called Quieting the Mind, Healing Anxiety, Fear, and Overwhelm Using a New Concept of Time. So I read it and was absolutely blown away by this wonderful convergence of the concept of relativity and gravity with sort of secret Buddhist teachings about the very tangible reality of thoughts. It was written by someone named Dr. Emily Chan, whose website is modernintegrativemedicine.com. So I, of course, had to reach out to her after reading this article. It really is very lovely, and I urge you to read it. But first, listen to this interview, because I reached out to her and asked, can I please interview you? And she went on my website, johnhanachek.net, and seemed to like what she saw, and so she agreed, which was a great honor. And so I got a chance to talk to her over the phone, which is how she does most of her work, interestingly enough. We started by talking about her article and her perspective on time and how she uses that, and continued to touch on some of the most important concepts in healing today, from mindfulness and grounding, to nutrition, to coherence of energy and thought, and all the way even through some existing technologies and desired technologies and how they might fit into a practice. And her ability to take a seemingly esoteric, abstract concept like relativity in physics and connect it right to your daily life and help you out. Since reading her article and since talking to her, I feel I have a better handle on my thoughts. I feel more comfortable saying to myself, I don't need to think these thoughts, they won't help me. And now I can sort of prove it to myself. My very physics, science-y sort of mind has been calmed by Dr. Chan's perspective, and I think that she is a very unique practitioner, an extremely valuable person. And please check out her website, modernintegrativemedicine.com.
All right. Hello, I'm with Dr. Emily Chan.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. My pleasure.
So I guess we can jump right into it, because I know I'm extremely interested to hear how you use, you seem to have done a sort of physics perspective of time and the mind to kind of actualize Einstein's relativity for a therapeutic setting, which is really, really fascinating. And I'm sort of curious, can you kind of outline your basic hypothesis with the sort of velocity and gravity of thought and I guess even trauma, and how that relates to people feeling like they have less time or more time, or they're stressed or things like that?
Yeah, so I've had a lot of patients who tell me that they don't have enough time, and they're coming in for certain diseases that they want to get better, be it something of a gastrointestinal problem or even anxiety and depression. And yet the therapies that we need to get healthy sometimes take time, and they feel that they don't have that. So they kind of start to get more and more hurried, and they feel that, well, if I take 1 hour out of my, let's say, 13 hours that they're awake, then they're left with 12 hours, right? So 13 minus 1 is 12. And so they feel that they have less time if already the time that they have is not sufficient for them to do everything that they do. And yet I have noticed in my life that the times that I am in a zone, that I have gotten done some things in 2 hours that I would have possibly taken 4 hours to do, or sometimes even 8 hours to do. And so I started wondering, well, how can I help my patients get into the zone where what if time is not linear? What if time operates in a different way? And that's how we came to this theory that Einstein has that relates to velocity and also gravity. So I'm going to explain a little bit more of velocity and gravity. Velocity is movement, how fast things move. Think of how fast you're thinking or your brain is going. Maybe if you're overwhelmed, it goes really fast. And then gravity, we can think of it as maybe a heaviness. You feel really the weight of the world on your shoulders. So kind of keep that in mind, these two words, velocity and gravity. So I was really inspired when I watched the movie Interstellar. I'm not sure if you've seen that movie before.
I have. It's an interesting way of thinking about this.
It's pretty interesting. So for those of you who haven't seen the movie, the synopsis is about a scientist who goes to space, and he leaves his young daughter behind, and his daughter was a child at the time. And when he went on his mission, his daughter was about 10 years old. When he came back to Earth from this mission in space, his daughter was an old grandma. So definitely the clocks that were ticking on Earth was not the same clock ticking in space, because when the scientist came back to Earth, he looked pretty much the same. He didn't age at all. So what's happening with the folding of time here, or the dilation of time? So according to Einstein's theory, basically that when gravity or velocity increases, we have that clock ticking differently. And that's the whole equation that he uses. What happens is, for example, he went on a mission, and he went on this mission to a planet. And when he went there for 1 hour on this planet that actually had a lot of gravity, it cost 7 years on Earth. So if you think about it, a lot of gravity means maybe a lot of weight. So if we just make a hypothesis that we have a lot of heaviness in our thinking, in our daily life, we're overwhelmed by things that are weighing us down. We just had 1 hour on that planet. However, without that much weight, it was 7 years on Earth. So don't you think that you can do a lot more in 7 years than you can in 1 hour, right? So that's kind of what happens with the weight, for example, in this, and that's physics. That's kind of an extreme form of physics, but how can we possibly apply this to our lives? So that's kind of the synopsis based on Einstein's theory, and also this movie, which was backed up a lot scientifically by a physicist named Kip Thorne, who consulted in shooting this movie.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really fascinating thing, and what you're doing here with this hypothesis that seems to work, and we'll get into that of the sort of actualization of this. Is you're treating thought very real. You're bringing it firmly into the realm of physics. And you're saying essentially that your thoughts can weigh you down. Your thoughts are going to dilate time in a similar way that gravity and velocity of the classic physics materialist way would do. And so my question comes in the therapy setting, how do you balance you're treating thoughts as real, but then you also want to free people from too much velocity or too much gravity. So how do you combine that reality of thinking with also the ability for them to let it go?
Yes. So a lot of times you might have even seen people who might feel a little bit anxious or a little bit depressed, and they have gone to therapy, right? And they may start to learn concepts of awareness. So they start to have a head knowledge that, hey, maybe I should let go, or maybe I should start counting my blessings and practicing gratefulness to help myself. So people start to then have that awareness in their head, knowledge-wise, that these are some things to do that would be beneficial for what they're going through. But what I find a lot in the clinical setting is that frustration, because sometimes my patients actually beat themselves up saying that, hey, I just can't. I know I should let it go, but I can't. And they start to beat themselves up every time their mind starts to race, feeling that they have no control over their body. And I tell them that it's not their fault. A big principle is when you're treating something that is in your body, so including emotions, you must address the physical body. So you have to help the person to be in their physical body. Sometimes we are too much in our head. So again, let's take velocity, our mind spinning. So maybe a person's in a pretty high, kind of like a beta wave, or even a gamma wave that is associated with hyperactive mind and anxiety. And that goes anywhere from 30 to 100 hertz, where if we're in more of a alpha wave, which is slower, it's only 9 to 13 hertz. Most people feel a little bit more blissed out, happy, peaceful. So if we can get their brain to slow down, physiologically, that would be helpful. And the way to do that is to get them more in their physical body. So sometimes thinking more about your problems is not, or knowing about it is not going to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes over-research of a problem, overthinking, it ingrains it more actually into your consciousness, more about the problem. And I have a technique called NET, which is called neuro-emotional technique. And what we do is that we take a certain emotion, be it fear. So for example, fear is associated with your organ kidney. And it doesn't mean that your kidney has a disease. It just means that it might be a little out of balance. But we can hold a body point in a certain sequence. And by holding that body point and doing some release techniques on perhaps someone might be fearful that the sense that I don't have enough money for the next month. And that might feel very much blown up to that person and be affecting them on a daily basis. And maybe even stop them from being able to take the steps to earn more money because of that paralyzing fear. We can help to reduce that sensation so that that is not an overwhelming sensation through the release point with the NET technique by holding different body points.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because in a way you're saying there's a lot of talk these days about mindfulness, but in a way it almost sounds like you're saying the trouble is our minds are so full. We probably need to be more body fullness or body feelness, need to connect more to our physiology.
Yeah. So that's where they get the word grounding from, right? You feel grounded. So it's kind of that feeling your feet connected to the earth. We have to move our energies down. Most people's energies, if you measure, are from the heart and up. So you have a lot of spinning in the head. And that can be also correlated in Chinese medicine. I'm Chinese, that your liver is an organ of detoxification. But if your liver is stuck, so in Chinese, the qi is stuck, then when the liver is stuck, liver produces fire. So they call liver fire. And does heat rise or sink?
It rises.
Heat rises. So heat rises and that heat goes to your head and it causes spinning. So things like insomnia, anxiety, stress is often a sign of that liver fire rising. And so with some patients, if that's the pattern, I will work on balancing the liver organ actually to really support stress. So every person's makeup is different and sometimes there are different causes, but that is a big one too. So we want to ground back into the body, move down, the energy down.
And so you are combining, effectively, you're combining techniques of sort of bodily activity, but also it sounds like you're really doing nutritional work too.
Yes. So there are different pillars of health. So of course you have that mind piece. That's one. So your thoughts. And then we have some body release techniques that balance your nervous system. So that's two. And then number three is just physically what you put in your body. So the nutrition that you're eating and also the nutrients that you're getting, sometimes through supplements and foods. So for example, some people might be deficient in certain building blocks that make certain brain chemicals called neurotransmitters. There's a neurotransmitter called glutamate. Glutamate is a bad guy. Glutamate is what fires excessively, and it causes premature aging of the brain, but also in younger people, it can be responsible for things like anxiety, depression, and ADHD, all signs that maybe perhaps glutamate may be elevated. The opposite of glutamate is a neurotransmitter named GABA, G-A-B-A, and GABA is a nutrient that is kind of like the red light. It says stop. And sometimes we need to stop and calm down to be in that peaceful state. We don't always need our minds to be running. In fact, most people have repetitive thoughts where 90% of our thoughts are the same thoughts throughout the day. So it's not necessarily a new idea. If we actually quiet our mind, we're going to be able to use less energy and be less tired, but be more effective in our thinking versus just being bombarded with that same thought spinning over and over again. And so GABA, this neurotransmitter, is kind of that stop sign that can help stop that excessive firing of GABA. But certain nutrients are needed to support that. So some patients might be deficient in certain B6, B12, or magnesium, or some amino acids are helpful to building these blocks. And there are ways I can test patients' brain chemicals like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, cortisol, their stress hormones, and see what's out of balance and help them balance and put their brain chemicals back in a place where they could feel better. And that can make a huge difference for some people if it's really a biochemical issue.
Yeah, what's been interesting to me is as I researched this, that there's so much going on in the field of there's nutritional work, and then there's also the placebo effect and how folks are starting to come around and say, well, wow, actually I can give folks a sugar pill and it works pretty well for certain things. So I wonder, I think maybe where I'm coming here is, for you in the clinical setting, it seems like you're trying both methods. You're doing a sort of, techniques, you're doing, reframing for gratitude, but then you're also doing nutrition. And maybe I'm curious about what's your most common sort of line approach. Someone comes to you, they have too many thoughts. What's the first thing that you're often going to do to get them to calm down? What do you find is most effective, or is it different for everyone?
It is actually different for everyone. Sometimes patients, because of just traditionally in our culture, what we are programmed to do is that they come to a doctor and they are wanting some kind of a pill or a supplement form. Sometimes that's something that they can latch onto better. And if that supplement can help them nutritionally balance to feel a little bit better, they have some faith that things are working and they're more willing and open to work on themselves. So sometimes for some people, that's just in our culture, the needed way to start. With some people in which they'd be more open to other things, such as what we're discussing about time and other states like that. It's interesting you mentioned about the placebo effect, and I want to touch on that a little bit. So the placebo effect with most studies is responsible for approximately a 30% improvement. Prozac, which is an antidepressant, has a very similar effect to placebo. So also at about a 30 to 35% effectiveness. So it is actually not that much better than placebo. Usually when people take Prozac, initially that first week they will feel a difference, but it starts to level out. And those drugs are more effective if somebody is very, very severely depressed. However, the side effects of such drugs, often I see a dampening of a person's personality. So they're not as sad, but they're not as able to experience joy. So they're more like zombies. And there can be dangers to that. Supplements I have found to be very effective in my practice, way more effective than our 30%. But even given a placebo, it's something interesting to look at in the concept of time and intention that we set, because whatever we put our attention to into our subconscious, we create. So we kind of poo-poo the placebo effect, saying, oh, it's just placebo, it's nothing. However, if something can improve something by 30%, that is still a marked improvement by merely someone believing that it's possible.
Yep.
So how about we combine something that actually does work, such as meditation, lifestyle changes, Chinese herbs, etc., with a mindset that we actually can create space. We're kind of just opening up that space to another 30% if possible through the placebo effect. That is not something that is a nothing. And the placebo actually itself is a study that whatever we believe creates an effect. So it's very powerful.
Yeah, you're kind of doing a super placebo, if you'll forgive the branding of it.
Yeah, that's a great branding. Super placebo. I like that.
Well, it's, it's something that I think you've done something here in a lot of ways. I've been, practicing yoga and other things, and I've come across this word for myself of permission, that a lot of these techniques, practices, and worldviews give you permission to rethink the way you're looking at the world. And probably, in my experience, the most powerful of those is the Buddhist philosophy, which is that everything that's moving is actually still, and everything that is still is actually moving. Buddhist thought always has a negation to everything, and so they can be taught. You can be told that it is possible to utterly and completely stop all thoughts entirely, which is not something that as a Westerner I believed at first until I did some practices in my body and was able to achieve some moments where there's nothing there. I am enlightened. That's it. That's it. It's white light. That's it. There's no thought about it. So I'm curious if you also are seeing yourself in a way as this kind of, you're opening a door for people that they're exploring on their own. I mean, you're kind of giving them, with this hypothesis in particular, you're giving people permission to rethink the way that time exists at all. You're saying, no, you don't have hours in a day. You have intentions and focus, and that's what makes your time. So, I mean, I guess I wonder how you think about yourself as someone who's giving permission to reframe culture. Is that something that you think you're doing as well?
Yes, it is. It's reframing culture. It's reframing a person's belief. Most people just believe what they believe at a 4-year-old, and they operate as an adult with that set of belief system, be it that if I don't stop working, I will be a beggar on the street. And so that sometimes is a belief that causes people to be workaholic, and they don't know they're doing that. It's on autopilot. Or the belief that it's difficult to find love, and that I either sacrifice some of what I like for love and have to compromise or not, and that there can't be. So whatever belief that people have, or in order to be healthy, it's hard work, and I won't have no fun and I can't enjoy life. And that can be an obstacle to somebody actually taking steps to healing themselves, is that belief. So one thing that really warms my heart and means the most to me and being a doctor is this opportunity to step into people's lives to not only help them with the physical complaints that they're coming in to me with, but it's that opportunity to talk to them, to shift the paradigm, to perhaps challenge what they believe that is not serving them right now, and for them to consider the truth and finding their truth. And in that stillness that you're talking about, the white light, that's basically God and the purity and the healing. And that white light is very, very powerful. And when somebody can connect to that and even think of absorbing that white light into their body, it's amazing how we sometimes don't know how to harness the energy that's available in our earth. And we use our body in ways that exhaust it. So there's so many people that have a lot of fatigue. There are ways through the concept of time and how we perceive our world that we are able to harness more of energy, because energy can not be created or destroyed, but is transferred from one form to the other. That's thermodynamics law. So how can we transform the energy to maybe not being stored as fat in our body, but used to feel energetic and heal? How can it move from one state to the other in a better way? So absolutely, with that paradigm change that you're talking about in shifting culture.
Yeah. I think I've got maybe 2 more questions, and then I probably should let you go. One of them, just quickly, I just wanted to see if you feel a resonance, kind of pun intended, with the idea of coherence that's been expressed by folks like Heart Math Institute and then is also all over quantum physics, where coherence is just basically that a system of matter can act as one. It's entrained with itself. So as you say, energy can't be created or destroyed, but the pattern of that energy expressing itself can be made more or less coherent. So it has either a more visible pattern or it's more sort of chaotic. And I wonder if that is coming into your practice or if you find that makes sense or just sort of, ways of increasing the amount, or not necessarily the amount of energy you get, but maybe it's the pattern, the clarity of the pattern that you are.
Yes. So HeartMath does do a lot of studies on the word coherence, and they measure your heart rate, and they plot graphs to show how coherent your body waves are based on a few physical measures. And coherence has been studied to reduce the chance of heart attack and other diseases. So that has been shown, and it's very powerful that we have that data. With regards to the word coherence culturally, basically it means that something is meshed together. So if somebody believes something and does something different, they're not coherent. So for example, if somebody's asking a favor and the person does not want to do it, and then they say yes, they're not coherent. They might then start to feel resentful that they did the favor, etc. So that person has a choice to either willingly do the favor or else have the guts to say no, right? So they need to be coherent with themselves. Physiologically, the coherence we're talking about with HeartMath is more kind of a physical measurement of the waves, pulses in our body.
I'm wondering if maybe coherence is the next frontier, because we've got the physiological side of coherence, and then you just eloquently talked about the sort of behavioral, mental side of coherence.
Yes.
Maybe there's a way to bring them together.
Yes. So when we measure coherence, and HeartMath has a device that people can measure at their homes, your coherence, by just clipping something on your ear. So it's something you can even do at home, and I've done it before myself, that when I started meditating, and for me, I would still love to meditate more, but it took me about 10 minutes to get into a pattern that was more coherent on the graph. So I believe that practicing more of that quieting the mind can be measured with these coherence machines, that you are more coherent, which studies show that it reduces chances of certain physical diseases later on. NET I found is a really great way, a technique that can also help patients become more coherent as well.
So maybe, actually two questions, and hopefully they'll be short. One,
sure.
The one next one is just briefly, maybe, do you have any ideas or desires for more such machinery? The X-ray sort of changed medicine. Do you ever find yourself wishing, I wish I could just show you a map of what you looked like right now so that I could help explain to you what's, some of the physiological, but also mental, do you find yourself dreaming of other, heuristics, methods, maps, diagrams, things like that?
Yes, absolutely. There are machines right now that can measure meridian health. So your liver, your spleen, and all of that. There are machines such as those that exist right now. I'm curious because they also say that the vibrational frequency of a person is important. So sometimes the vibrational frequency, or you can say the vital force, the chi, of a person can drop. So generally there's varying discussions with that, but in the 60s to 70s is pretty healthy. But when it drops down to, let's say, 55, a person's more susceptible to candida. If it drops down further lower, they're more susceptible to cancer. So what about some machines that can hook up to measure the electro frequencies of people at their vibrational frequencies to kind of be a measure of their health? Would be a great apparatus, and I could think of all kinds of machines that would be wonderful, that would kind of take a snapshot in time to measure a person's state, that they could even use at home, not only in a doctor's office, to track themselves, and that could motivate them to use patterns of thinking or lifestyle that works for them, because everybody's an individual and some things work better for certain people than others.
That's pretty cool. So I'll wrap up because I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I've got some great stuff here. And now I think the final question is, how would I or anyone listening who's more of a lay person, but I have someone in my life or maybe a few people in my life who I think, oh, geez, you really could use to throttle down your brain, really could use to do some of these techniques. How do I get them to start, even if they're maybe resistant or say, no, I don't have time or whatever it is? Is there any way for an outsider to kind of gently nudge someone and say, hey, hold your kidney for a little bit here every day or something like that? Is there any way for us to help those around us, or do they have to come to it on their own?
Yeah, so definitely. So one of the best ways to help somebody is to ask a person questions. So nobody likes to be told what to do. It's kind of like your parents bossing you around. So if you can come to a point that you ask them some questions that they come to the realization on their own, that can often be helpful for someone to see that they need some help. And sometimes some people are ready and not, and you can do as much as you can to help someone. So that's kind of your 50%. And then it's the other person's 50% to respond. And I tell my patients a lot of that because sometimes they feel the weight of the world to perhaps help their spouse or a loved one, the family who doesn't want to get help, and they feel the burden of the result. And the result sometimes is just not all in our hands. But I'm also happy to help a patient like that if they wanted to be in touch with me. I do 10-minute free consultations to see if a person would be a good fit for us to work together. So they can contact me on my website, which is modernintegrativemedicine.com. And I do work with patients all over the world, so distance is not a problem.
That's excellent. I think you even helped me release a weight, which is, it's just not in my hands. So let it go and be more attentive, ask questions, and I guess keep some curiosity about all this too, because it seems like every day, we're learning something new about the way we perceive the world and how to actually make our way through it in a effective way, but also a way that feels nice and is enjoyable, not just returning something or being efficient. So I really appreciate your time. Pun again intended.
Well, thanks for having me. It's so fun speaking with you. You have so much insight here. And yes, the world, I agree with you, is about having some fun. It's about balance, right? Sometimes we're all focused on how do I just do the right thing? And there's that one way. And the thing is that we're dynamic beings. And so sometimes something that might be helpful to even you in this phase of your life, maybe something different when you're in a different phase of your life. And it's being aware and being able to be quiet enough to tap into that. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I have been talking to Dr. Emily Chan, and check out her website, and I'll link it in the description of this. Really do check it out. She will talk to you all over the world, and she's part of a movement of people who are I think they're bringing through ancient perspectives, mixing them up in the modern day, and giving us all this incredible gift of, hey, it doesn't have to be a multi-billion-dollar corporate effort to cure depression. It could just be do a pose for a little while and have a nice life. So I really think that we are actually doing fine, and there's a lot of doom and gloom out there these days, but every time I meet someone like Dr. Chan, I always feel relieved because it's not that difficult to become healthy. It's just more of a perspective shift, and everyone can do it. We're all able, and we're all learning here together, so take care.